It happens. And thank you all for your patience. It's an experiment for everyone. I'm going to start again. Welcome. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to share some stories. We're going to go on a bit of a whirlwind tour. And just in case you hadn't already noticed this, I won't be moderating the chat or questions throughout the talk. I trust that folks will just chat amongst themselves, place questions, and then in about 20 minutes, I will pause and open things up for discussion. And I really look forward to that. In the meanwhile, I'm going to set the stage for what's about to happen, which is I'm going to share with you why I left 20 years of pretty well paid and really interesting sustainability consulting work, what I do now, and how I use Medium to make this mischief. So that's my intention. I'm going to breeze through a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to go right past a bunch of side trails. In case anybody wants to go further into those side trails, I've created a little set of breadcrumbs, which I'll make live at the end because I can't make things live and talk to you at the same time. So bear with me. And if you feel lost, don't worry. I'll make sure you can find your way, at least at the end, if not as we go. And with that, I'd like to jump right in, if I may, and I'm going to take us back in time. We're going to go back about 20 years, in fact, almost exactly 20 years, to August 2003, when I was just about to start a new job. I had been in for a number of years the field of financial services, mainstream corporate, and I had that feeling, I don't know if you know this feeling, you go in your office tower downtown through the revolving door, your body goes in and your soul goes right back out. That was kind of me for a number of years working in a fascinating but kind of soul-crushing job. And you know, in these jobs, we make it work, right? We work with great people, the camaraderie, maybe really interesting skills, learning, the pay, the benefits. There's all kinds of reasons we're there. And we cope, you know, we save for really cool vacations. We make our homes awesome. Maybe we party more with our coworkers, but something doesn't feel quite right. It's not life affirming. And there's this sense that there's something better out there. That's kind of where I was at. So I left, did a little bit of soul searching, and through a friend of a friend, I landed a consulting job in the field of corporate responsibility or sustainability, more and more called ESG, environmental, social, and governance consulting. I was very new to this field. I was so new to the field that I didn't even know I was in a new field. I just knew I was going to be working with large banking, mining, oil and gas companies, and others. And my job was going to be to help them be more socially and environmentally responsible. So I was like, yay, my soul and my body can stay together during my day job. And that felt like a great thing. But, I remember like it was yesterday, even though it was 20 years ago, my first day on the job, my boss takes me out for lunch, a kind of orientation welcome lunch. And I ask her in all sincerity, when will we be done? And she laughed. So I probably should have known at that moment that something was awry, but I kept going for another 20 years. And there were a lot of great things. There was a lot to love. Sorry, bear with me as I'm navigating just a little bit more tech. Oh, hang on. This is the strangest darn thing. There we go. There was a lot to love over the next 20 years. And I want to share a bit about what there was to love, because the sustainability consulting world is big and vast. And I think one of my most delightful things that I loved was learning about how industry actually works, like really going backstage, going into factories, foundries, mining companies, plantations, like going into the mine sites, into the forest plantations and the agricultural sites. It was, and I don't say farms for a reason, it was amazing. I loved learning how industry really works. I loved facilitating different conversations. So a lot of my work was stakeholder engagement with activists, academics, executives in English, French, Portuguese. And I really loved being part of sort of opening up space and letting people say what they thought, what they felt, and really letting those ideas come out. And I loved, really, one of the amazing things is I loved getting to increase my understanding of how strategy really works across global companies. So I worked with about 100 different companies, household names like PepsiCo and Walmart, a lot of behind the scenes companies, those massive companies you don't even know they exist. And then you get to know them, you're like, whoa, these guys are everywhere, in forestry, in infrastructure, in media, education, etc. So I really loved learning about strategy, about corporate risk, even things kind of nerdier things like governance and policy and reporting. I came to really love, understanding how those things all fit together. And I think one of my favorite things that I loved about these decades of sustainability consulting was I got to rekindle my connection with Brazil. So the reason I speak Portuguese is I did an exchange when I was a teenager and I learned the language. And that led quite serendipitously to getting invited to do consulting work with a large forest company and one of the big banks in 2014. And that evolved into a number of deep and really wonderful collaborations with thought leaders and sustainability leaders in Brazil. In fact, not too many years ago, I was invited as a keynote speaker at this pretty big industry event. I was the speaker right after the governor of the state of Sao Paulo. And, there I was talking about beyond the circular economy. It was kind of amazing. And I sort of felt like a bit of a rock star. Like I was really honored. I felt like I was part of something really important, real change. And, I also got paid pretty well. So when I had a paycheck, my paycheck topped out a little over $100,000. When I freelanced, especially in the latter years with the experience and relationships, it was usually around double that. So it was a pretty good living. I was working with amazing people, amazing companies, traveling around the world, pretty exciting. I felt like I was part of positive change. But there were things that didn't sit right, that I didn't feel good about. So for example, I mentioned going into mine sites. Well, I remember once touring coal mines in the US where we were looking at mountaintops that had been blown off and the huge coal equipment moving the coal. And, we weren't there to stop the coal mining and we weren't there to stop the mountaintop removal. We were there to learn about their improved health and safety practices and the job creation. And that didn't feel great. I didn't love, for example, going into an industrial food production site for one of the largest fast casual restaurants in the world and seeing how all the food was prepped for these millions of customers. And, we weren't there to see the end of monoculture in the mainstream food system or how to bring nutritious food to the working poor. We were there to understand their new and improved food safety protocols because a number of customers had died from E. coli outbreaks tied to those restaurants. I found it tough going into the manufacturing facilities where the molecules of flavor and fragrance are made, for example, for things like your dryer sheets. So your nose tells your brain that your laundry is outdoor fresh, thanks to those manufactured molecules. And I was, I wasn't there to help them change the world. I was there to understand their implementation of green chemistry practices and waste reduction. So those things were tough to see, given we were talking about system change and doing good. I went back to freelancing in 2016, thinking, maybe I can, if I'm just picky about the work that I do, if I'm really courageous in the jobs that I do, if I work really, really hard, maybe I can make some change from within. But I was wrong. I saw sustainability people working really, really hard. I saw a lot of resource and care and attention going towards initiatives and reports and projects. I did not see systems change. I saw sales targets and timesheets. I saw a lot of really ambitious sustainability goals that totally ignored why we needed those goals in the first place, which was because those harmful structures are really profitable. And one of the things that was the hardest to see that I really didn't love was how the people who really knew what we need to do were the least invited to the table, the most marginalized, silenced, or worse. And an example of that, which ironically comes from what I think of as one of the best practices that I saw, still underscores where this sustainability effort just does not go in the right direction. I was on the advisory board of a global company headquartered in Brazil. 4 times a year, I and a small handful of experts were flown international business class to meet with the CEO, the chairman of the board, and to really spar for these sort of multi-day meetings on how to bring true sustainability leadership to the company. And in one of these 2-day meetings, for about an hour and a half of the agenda, we had a chance to meet with 2 folks from local Indigenous communities. And they were so generous and gracious with their time and knowledge. They were so open and participating in this conversation in spite of what has happened to their land and their communities. They were right there for an hour and a half of a 2-day meeting. And when it came time at the end they were gone, and it was time for the experts to share with the executives our recommendations and impressions, I remember feeling so much shame and sadness. And to be honest, I choked up. I still choke up when I think about how those people know more about ecology. They know more about community health and wellness than any of us in that room. They were there for an hour and a half, and then they got to go back. Well, we carried on. Their words could not touch the business model. They were not there to touch the business model. And that was stakeholder engagement at its best. So what did I do about it? Well, you might say I ran away. After about 10 years of living in New York City, I've skipped over a few little breadcrumbs here I mentioned. I was in Toronto, freelanced, worked for a firm, freelanced, moved to New York, left a new firm, and went back to freelancing. And after about 10 years of being in New York City, where a lot of that work was happening, I came back to Canada, where I am now. I'm in Montreal. And I was really trying to figure out how to take these ideas, these feelings, this expertise, these relationships forward. And I said I ran away because at that time I was actually doing a lot of long distance running. Now, there's a lot I could say here. I definitely have left some breadcrumbs on the side trail that I'll make available at the end here, because there's a ton I could say about this, but I'm going to fast forward to Sunday, October 17th in 2021. I lace up my running shoes, a distance runner, daydreaming about other paradigms, and I go for a 5-day run. I ran an average of more than a marathon a day for 5 days. And I got back on Thursday, October 21st at 6:30. And I put my hand on the doorknob of the apartment where I lived at the time. And I opened the door, and I knew that I had entered another paradigm. I'm skipping over a lot here, but the reason I bring this story up is because you might know what I mean. Have you ever, not necessarily about the 5-day run, I realize that's a bit unusual, but very doable, and I could say more about that. But the thing I want to bring to your attention here is, you know that thing that can happen where you've got a big question that you're mulling over, something about your life, it's important, and you're ruminating, you're thinking about it, and it's really on the back of your mind quite a bit. But then, we have lives, we've got to do things. We go on about our days, and without realizing it, we're thinking about the question, we're problem solving, and then suddenly we can see the answer clearly. That's what happened to me on that 5-day run. I was holding the question of how to change the paradigm of the sustainability conversation, of the economic model in which we live. And when I put my hand on the door, I got home and opened the door, suddenly I realized I was working in service of another vision. Of course, I had to have dinner and take a shower and a few other things. But I really was working in service of this other vision. This vision is an economy that works in service of life. I'll say that again. My vision is an economy that works in service of life. That is every company in every industry, everywhere around the world, doing business in a way that brings about life-affirming outcomes. It's not a program or an initiative. It is what the economy does. And the thing is, I'd noticed through my 20 years of working backstage as this so-called VIP working on systems change, but not really changing systems, that the economy at the moment doesn't work in service of life. In fact, life is serving it. A lot of life, human lives and other lives are serving the economy, and it's causing a lot of harm in a lot of cases. Hence these ambitious sustainability goals that still seem to miss the point. And the harm is happening in different ways to different degrees in different parts of the world. And we're starting to notice. So different people in different ways are noticing at different times. Some, you might say, experienced full-on collapse a long time ago. Others are just beginning to realize there's some real fissures opening up in our ecological and social fabric, maybe in our community fabric, even in our inner fabric. And the reasons behind this are complex. There's a lot happening, but I'd seen with my own eyes that industry is connected to the activities that are causing this harm. And I realized, I've got a world of skills and experience with industry. There's something I can do about this. And so in the same moment, I realized, most sustainability teams and companies are not looking for people to help them work in service of life. It's just not on their to-do list. So I was going to need to create a new job for myself. And that's what I did. Now, you might have noticed this tendency in our professional worlds where folks will say, hey, you know what, before you go to the next thing, like cool idea, but while you're daydreaming, stay where you are, get the next thing set up, and then go to it. But the thing is, I've noticed when we do that, we lock ourselves into the very paradigm we're trying to get out of. We maybe make tweaks, variation, but we stay stuck. And I resisted that tendency. I said, hey, broken paradigm, I'm done with you. You can't have any more of my time. You can't. I don't even want your money anymore. I want to work in service of something bigger. And so I changed my website to say that I work for an economy that works in service of life. And then I figured I better dive into what that actually means. And that's what created the space for this new type of materiality. So I'm going to geek out for a second in ESG consulting and then bring us home. In the mainstream consulting work that I'd been doing, we did a lot of what's called a materiality assessment. Basically, that's jargon for we're going to figure out what issues are important for you. And for a big food company, that's going to be things like farmer wages. For a mining company, that's going to be things like conflict minerals. They're both going to be looking at things like climate change. But at the end of the day, believe it or not, companies, probably any big, especially publicly traded company you've heard of, is paying between $20,000 and $200,000 for consultants to run around and regurgitate a list of issues. The project is confidential. The list of issues is public. There's nothing new under the sun with these things. We would say as consultants, well, it's a strategic discussion tool, but I never saw it impact strategy, and I never saw it impact the issues on the ground. And so I set about to create a new kind of assessment, not confidential, using the disclosures that are public, since I know how to find them. I'd had a conversation with a client who I skipped a little step there. I was winding down my client projects when I realized I needed to do this. I basically said to them, I love you, and I'm not going to take on any more work with you. And when I was in this wind down mode, I was talking with one quite candidly, saying, I'm concerned there is an impact. I'd had this conversation many times, as have many of them. And I said, I just feel like ESG and ESG materiality is missing reality. And then this light bulb went on. I'm going to put reality into materiality. So I took this sort of traditional jargony sustainability consulting blob, and I turned it into an open, free resource using the public disclosures of companies that I know how to find public disclosures, even if I haven't worked with them. It's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. So I know exactly where to find them. Started to create a series of assessments, open source, anybody could look at them. And I was using Medium to share what I was doing. And that ended up creating an unexpected windfall. Tell you a little bit about that, and then we'll open things up and see what you think. So I committed to doing 4 of these assessments. A lot was going on. I was doing these for free. Nobody was paying me. It's a bit of a risk, but to step into another paradigm, I realized I had to do things differently. I opened up a tip jar, and I continued to make myself available for coaching and advisory work and presenting. And a number of people, clients who were sort of like, yeah, we're curious about how to stop the industrial insanity ourselves, we'd love to hear from you. So I was able to, build a little bit of runway while doing these assessments. I got to the third assessment, was getting bogged down, and I realized I needed to find some way to really get myself going. So I drew on what I learned from that running paradigm shift of the 5-day marathon, and I created a materiality marathon on Medium. This is all, again, I have a big breadcrumb trail if anybody wants to follow the bits here. But the point is, I went about every day being hyper accountable, which is what I was asking of companies, to my Medium community and just sharing what I was doing. And that led to something quite interesting. In fact, it led to a big windfall that I was not expecting. So just to be clear, the Medium stats on those daily posts during the marathon were quite modest. I would have between sort of 30 and 50 readers on those. So we're talking about like 50 cents in earnings. The article earnings were not where I gained the income. It was where that small group of people who'd been sort of cheering me on, asking me for feedback, provoking me, they were sharing in their networks. They were taking this public resource that I was creating about big companies and their big goals and their disclosures and my guidance around what it could look like to really serve an economy in service of life. And they were sharing in their networks. I got a request from a group that does research for environmental journalists. If they could pick the company that I did next, they would tip me $10,000. That's a lot of money when you're sort of bootstrapping and going on fumes. And so I said yes. I did the assessment on JBS, which was their pick. That is the world's largest protein production company or meat company. They happen to be headquartered in Brazil. And these folks didn't even know that I spoke Portuguese. It was a great fit. This is all public. And again, breadcrumbs, I'll link in just a moment. So it was a great experience. And so much of that happened because Medium is an open platform where anybody can share what they're doing. Readers and writers can give each other feedback, no advertising, which is why I'd really doubled down on my time spent on Medium in that switch where I sort of walked into another paradigm. I've skimmed really quickly through a whole bunch of stuff. I shared with you this door that I walked through into another paradigm. And I just want to highlight for you that these doors to other ways of being are all around us. I want to quickly show you one now. Imagine there's a door right in front of you. And you open it up and you see another version of you on the other side. And just for a moment, just imagine that version of you is doing something you love, you are great at, you feel great when you're doing it. No need to force it, just see what comes up and it may evolve over time. You just know you feel great when you're doing this thing that you see you doing. And now look around you as you're doing that and notice how the world around you benefits from you doing what you're great at, what you love, what affirms your life. And notice the web of life, everything connected, improves when your wellness improves. And imagine that here on this side of the door, where that is what happens, that these things happen because they're more aligned with how life actually works, how physics actually work, how our hearts and minds actually work. That's what goes on this side of the door. And so in closing, I invite you to stay with me on this side of the door, where we work in service of life. If I can be of service to you, these breadcrumbs that I'll put here might be of use. And anyway, I'm just glad to have good company. I suspect a few of you already have at least a foot into this part of the door. And I hope you'll bring your whole selves and join me. I'm really excited what we can do together. Thank you for joining. And I'm going to pop open the Q&A and see what's there. But before I do that, I want to put this breadcrumb trail that I mentioned that has links to the gerbillion things that I just super breezed past because time. This is a link to many, many breadcrumbs that I mentioned in my talk, how to plan for something extraordinary like a 5-day run when you're just an average runner. There we go. I hope you're seeing a breadcrumb piece. If not, I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with this tech, but my most recent post on Medium is this breadcrumb post, and I'm not sure if it's working. Oh my gosh, am I still here? Oh, these buttons are crazy. Okay, I'm going to look at the questions and see what's here. Link isn't working. You keep talking about breadcrumbs, but you don't know what I mean. Totally fair, Neil. I hope you're still here. What I mean by those breadcrumbs, and by the way, please feel free to add any additional questions. We've got a couple more minutes. So if people are wondering, their head is spinning, they have questions about sustainability, ESG, what I'm up to, what you might be up to, I'd love to hear your questions. The link isn't working. Golly. I don't know how to add something to the chat here. If there's a moderator who can tell me how to add to the chat, you might be able to see it. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining. I really hope you can find that breadcrumb trail, because I placed a whole bunch of things. There's sort of goodies for everybody, from writers on Medium to distance runners to sustainability consultants and professionals wondering how to make our goals really have a positive impact. Yeah. And Neil, I'm talking about breadcrumbs. I hope you now see the answer. I'm going to see if I can drop the link as a reply into your question. This is the link to the breadcrumb trail. I was trying to put that in the call to action, but I don't know if the call to action came up. Anyway, thanks so much for your attention. Really great to have you here. I recognize some of the names. Not sure what happened with those moderator buttons. That was a bit peculiar, but really delighted to have you on board. I'm told there's a chat, but I don't see the chat feature. So if you've chatted and you want to tell me something, you can also get in touch through that breadcrumb trail. You see the link. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tucker. Well, you've made my day. So good to have you on this side. I already knew you're on this side of the door. Yeah, great to see you all. Thanks, folks, and enjoy the rest of the day. I'll probably see you in some of the other sessions, even though we can't see each other. Thank you. Just going to keep checking if anything else is coming in here, because you have to refresh all questions. Yeah. One day the paradigm just changed. You can't have me anymore, old paradigm. I'm moving on. Oh, thank you, Flora. I see your question. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. There's all these links. Oh, you guys are angels. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, there were all these things that came in. Just tell us the main address to the link. Yep. Thank you. Folks have added it for me. You are all angels. I love how we have each other's backs. It keeps showing me other people are moderating, which is confusing. I think it's going to cut us off in a little bit. Yeah, Susan, the big breakup. Yes, the threatening. So I'm seeing your question. Have other people felt threatened? Absolutely. People will be like, well, how am I supposed to put my kids through school? Or I have a mortgage. There's one of the things that I found in the big run that I did, if you're still here, and anybody who's still here, to go from like, I've never done this before, to I'm going to do something super way different than I've ever done. There's things you can do. The number one is invite the desire to do it. Number two is plan for it. You know, you're here now, you got to get to that other place. There's a lot of steps. What are they? Start taking them. Find people who've done super extraordinary things before. And they might not be human people. They might be more than human, other creatures, other bodies of water, forests, and ask them, how do you do such extraordinary things? What's it like? What can I copy? What can I learn? And last but not least, this is all written up in the How to Be Ordinary and Do Extraordinary Things breadcrumb. Listen to the critics, including your inner ones, because they're trying to keep you safe and give you good ideas, but don't listen to them too much, because you're trying to break new ground. You're trying to do things you haven't done before. That is not something the critics really want to see happening. Yeah, try to turn those threats into feedback. Hope that helps. Thanks, folks. I think there's still a few here, and I'm just clicking through the links. There were a lot. A lot of them were saying the link does work, doesn't work, You're welcome for the talk. Thank you for your kind feedback. Really appreciate your being here. It's a weekend and so many people coming out to do cool things. Just double checking. Every time you reload, there's more questions. It's an exciting. Dang, the chat threw me off. It threw me off too. Thank you, whizzing. Really appreciate you being here. What is my individual material impact on the environment? That's a big question. I kind of go on about that at length in my some of my writing. And the truth is, I don't know a lot of the time, but I do try to minimize it. I live fairly humbly, and I also think where my role is most useful is using my expertise with global companies to identify places where their strategy can change. That's not an excuse for living large and having 7 bathrooms and driving 6 Hummers, which I don't, and I don't. But that is where I can have the greatest impact. So one of the things I try to do is look at what is my role, and I work with other people to figure out, what is your role? Because we're all great at different things. So what am I great at that can have that most positive impact, those potential system changes? So where I try to have the greatest impact is to work with decision makers who move trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of jobs to have them realize, oh, right now we're not working in service of life. We're harming life. What would it look like to be different? And to be honest, most of them haven't even had that thought. So just having that thought is a bit of a paradigm shift for many. What happens next is out of my control, but it's within my influence, I'd like to think. So that's, but I ask myself, what can I do to improve my positive impacts and eliminate my negative ones? I think about that a lot. Thank you for the question. I'd be curious how you would answer that. You can, in theory, reply if you're still here, Joshua. We haven't been cut off yet. I think we're going to be cut off in just a moment. Thank you, Pen, for the pen magnet. I love it. For the clap. I clap at you for sharing your Saturday. Or it's already Sunday in a lot of time zones. So we'll just keep refreshing and see what pops up, because there's many things just keep reappearing. Thanks, Kathy. So good to see you here. Thank you. Thanks, folks. There's still a few people here. I wish you could unmute. Maybe you can. It tells me there's 8 people wanting to moderate. I don't really know what that means. I'll share my feedback with the wonderful Medium folks who made this possible. I think it's a learning curve for everyone. Cool. Well, I'm going to sign off with much gratitude. Thank you so much for those of you who were here till the beautiful end. Have a great rest of your days, mornings, afternoons, evenings, and look forward to staying with you on this side of the door and walking alongside. Hope to connect with you directly. Thank you. Bye for now.